Alright, now let's look at a class implementation that uses generics. So we see here that this is a container of type E, so we would replace all E's with whatever type we specify when we instantiate the class. So we also see in our set and get methods that set takes in an element of type E, and get would return an element of type E. So the letter in the brackets is known as the formal type parameter. And when we call the container and define a type, the E is replaced by the actual type argument. So to invoke this class, we must perform a generic type invocation. So upon instantiation, we would put in the data type of what we would like to store in our container right after the container mark. Now let's take a look at what autoboxing is because it plays an important role in Java generics. So one of the restrictions in using generics is that they can't be instantiated with a primitive type such as int, double, char, and so on. Luckily, we have class objects that correspond to these primitive types. When we place an item into our container that looks like a primitive type, such as the integer value 50, Java does something called autoboxing. This is a term for converting a primitive data type into an object of equivalent type. So here's an example. It may look like we're just adding the int 50, but Java actually turns this integer into the corresponding object. Now remember this, as it's a very important concept to understand in understanding Java generics. Now let's look at another simple example of a generic class called couple. So this just takes in two elements of the same type, call them first and second. Here's our constructors and our get and set methods. So in our tester here, all we do is we instantiate this couple, and then we specify that we're going to send it two strings. This could be integer or double or whatever you want. And then we just put in two strings here, and all we're doing is printing it out. So that's a pretty simple example. Now let's look at a very similar example class, but with two types. So we have two types here, t and u, and we have our first as t and second as u. And we have our constructors and get and set methods. So here, if we wanted to do string and ints, we can have Bobby and then the integer 23. So this just prints it out, and you can try this on your own if you want.